Hello and welcome to episode 120 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. My name is Sigmund Judge. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Devon Dundee. Another exciting week in the world of Apple TV, and probably one of my favourite episodes this week because we're going to be talking about our tvOS wishes. Not necessarily this year's tvOS wishes, Devon. That will come next week. But before all of that, how are you doing? Has there been any iPad acquisition jealousy going on in your world?
If I'm being completely honest, Sigmund, I'm doing well. First of all, thank you for asking. But full transparency, I have been jealous of everyone who's been getting their new iPads and talking about how much they're enjoying the OLED displays. Of course, I didn't purchase one this time around, but I really enjoyed getting to keep up with your experience of getting a new iPad. I know that you've had a lot of fun with it. So what's going on with your iPad purchase and how are you feeling about it?
Okay, I'm feeling very, very happy with my purchase. Let me just say that. I think we talked about the fact that I was going to pick one up, have a look at it, return it. The iPad mini was for me, right? And I didn't need to look past it. I picked up an 11-inch and a 13-inch just to take a look. I looked at pretty much everything from glossy screens to the nano texture, which we'll get into. And then I also looked at the screen sizes. Now, as someone that has been using an iPad mini for the last few years at least, and really enjoying that form factor, going from that mini size to a 13-inch was too big a step, let me just say. The 11-inch I actually think is the perfect size for the iPad Pro. Having them both side by side the last few days, I preferred the picture and the density, I think, maybe, of the pixels. I'm not too sure the technical aspects, but to my eye, especially with like compressed streaming video content, I preferred the picture on the 11-inch compared to the 13-inch on the displays I had. And that's what I ended up going with. I sold my iPad mini, I sold a bunch of technology that wasn't being used anymore, or not to as big a deal as it needed to be to justify still having it. So, made some sacrifices, but decided to purchase the iPad Pro 11-inch. May have also got a couple of accessories. The Apple Pencil, the Magic Keyboard, which has done the rounds this week. But there are a few reasons very quickly. In terms of content consumption, one of the big things that I do with the iPad is I take it with me to the gym. And I've started going back to the gym, and it was the perfect size to rest on the running machine for me compared to the 13-inch. I've tried both. The 11-inch was the way to go. My local gym recently had a bit of a redecoration, and it's very, very dark with a few like neon lights scattered about. It's very, very strange. And that meant that really I don't get much glare at all on the screen. I think the screen is bright enough in the majority of use cases for me. And that's why I didn't go with the nano texture, because the nano texture display, as beautiful as it is, it loses a lot of the darker highlights that you would expect with HDR. And it felt like, after this introduction of this incredible tandem OLED display, that I would be kind of diminishing those returns for not a lot of extra value, considering you've got that bump up in price and you have to start with a 1 terabyte model as well, which was a big put off for me because 256 gigabytes, believe it or not, is what I went with. I think I'm going to be good with that. I've survived with the iPad mini this long with 256 gigabytes, and it just feels like a good entry point, Devon. They are kind of like my shorthand thoughts. Did you have any questions?
Okay, so you got the silver iPad Pro, right? And then I'm assuming the silver Magic Keyboard, very normal looking version of the Magic Keyboard that you've got, right?
Yeah, I think everyone's seen it by now, but I picked up the silver keyboard. I also picked up the space black keyboard. The thing I always wanted was the keyboard that I have right in front of me, the Mac long Touch ID keyboard, which is silver with black keys. Silver with black keys is my jam. Matches beautifully with the Siri remote. And so on Saturday, I spent a good 7 hours removing the keys from the space black keyboard and one by one replacing the white keys on the silver with the black. It didn't go 100% to plan. I got some help on Monday morning by a anonymous genius who was happy to help me, and now everything is back and working. But yeah, there were a few keys that were lost along the way. Thankfully none of them being the function row keys, so I have something very different to what is available to the general public. Of course, it was expensive, it was stressful. This was my first ever keyboard mod, and we'll be talking more about it over at Mac Stories. So I'm looking forward to giving the details and maybe giving some tips on what to do and what not to do. I'm really happy with it. I think it's a beautiful piece of technology. The weight, the size of it is a technical marvel, right, in terms of hardware design. But, you know, this week is all about software. So moving swiftly on, everything coming up on the show this week, we have, as mentioned, our WWDC wishes of years past, a recap of the brilliant Sugar, but we start this week with our highlight, the Season 4 return of Trying.
Nikki and Jason are experienced adopters, having built a lovely little nuclear family enriched by an extraordinary support network. However, as their teenage daughter, Princess, starts to yearn for a connection with her birth mother, Nikki and Jason find themselves confronted with the ultimate test of their parenting skills.
It's been 6 years since we adopted our 2 children, and parenting hasn't got any easier.
Happy Mother's Day! Your dad had something in his eye.
When was the last time you did something for yourself without the kids?
Oh, no, I had a mammogram last week.
Life might not be an even playing field, but we can get through anything if we just keep talking.
Oh, if Karen calls, I'm not speaking to her, and neither are you.
That's the spirit.
Well, we're back for Season 4. This is created, written and executive produced once again by Andy Walton, starring Esther Smith, Rafe Spall, Scarlett Rayner and Cooper Turner. This is a show that I mentioned earlier this week should have probably been called Crying rather than Trying, because every episode I feel like I am consistently on the verge of really ugly tears, Devon. I don't think I'm the only one. And I feel like that has been a consistent feeling over the first 3 seasons, focused on relationships, but predominantly about adoption. What did you think of the intro to this 4th season?
Well, like you, I was very excited to jump back into this world. I do always forget just how hard this show hits me right in the heart every time I watch it. It's just something that's hard to describe, but it really does just have such an emotional punch to it, and I love it so much. This first episode of Season 4, I feel, is a very on-brand way of getting us back into the world of Trying. It's got a healthy mix of sadness, sarcasm, and humor. They find that blend so perfectly with Trying, and it's just something that I haven't experienced anywhere else, but you just instantly know it when you jump into this show. I won't give anything away plot-wise, but the introduction to this season certainly does keep you on your toes in a way that I think is going to be fun for a lot of people. And it really is just, again, just getting back to that playfulness, maybe playful heaviness. Is that a way of putting it, of Trying?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think this series really kind of plays on what I think British comedy does so well, and that is that kind of dark humour, and yet it's still able to mould itself into what is a family comedy. Throughout this premiere episode, which is now available in the TV app, I did feel a lump in my throat. You know, there are, as you mentioned already, touches of loss, but also, you know, there's this continued father-son dynamic that so many of us will understand. You know, when it's too tough to talk from the heart and share feelings, we often revert back to talking about football. And there's some really sweet moments in this first episode. I actually experience, and I guess I am kind of spoilering it a tiny bit, right? The setting of this episode is based around a funeral. I experienced a funeral just like the one depicted. Maybe not so many surprises, but I think this is a fair and comically accurate depiction of Londoners going through it and grieving in their own way. I also had someone trying to sell me disabled parking badges during my great uncle's post-funeral drinks a few years ago. So that moment made me especially laugh. There's a special role now in this 4th season that the kids who have all grown up have taken, and Princess has turned into this blend of a young woman that really is the mix of both Nikki and Jason. Kids are all grown up, Devon.
They are. That is a huge element of this new season, is that they've had to recast Princess and Tyler. We got to spend some time with in past seasons, and I loved the actors who portrayed them in those seasons. And so I was a little trepidatious about recasting those characters. Of course, we're doing a 6-year time jump between season 3 and 4. So if they weren't going to recast, they were going to have to wait a long time to make this next season, which we wouldn't have liked that either. So this is the compromise that we've come to. But I have to say, I'm actually thrilled with the performances of these older actors. You mentioned Princess, played by Scarlett Rayner. I really feel like as a character, she's coming to her own in these 6 years that we've been away from her. I love the way that she's not afraid to match wits with her parents and even push Jason a bit in the season premiere. Just the way she interacts with them, you can see that confidence that maybe she didn't necessarily have before, where she's just very settled. She knows who she is, and she's not afraid to go toe-to-toe with people in a positive way, not combatantly, but I just really love that aspect of her performance. I think that character is one who has changed a lot in the 6 years that we've been away, but someone who has more stayed the same in a way that I love so much is Tyler, who's now played by Cooper Turner. He's a great physical match for an older version of Mickey McNulty, but I would say that's just the start of his portrayal of Tyler. He shows that withdrawn but caring nature that Tyler has perfectly. And one thing about his personality that I love that they've kept is his obsession with odd objects. This season, he's graduating from a lamp to something much larger. But I love that that aspect of his personality has stuck around. And I feel like there's that core to Tyler that hasn't changed in these 6 years. And so I love the dynamism of the kids, but also the way that they haven't changed as well. And I'm really just happy with the casting here and the way that we're jumping back into this world. I just love it.
Yeah, and, you know, we talked about how, like, sad this can be and how funny it can be. But there's also, like, a poignancy to this. I've put in the notes about the comedic outlet from both Scott and Karen, Karen being Nikki's sister, who ends up getting pregnant and having a child when Nikki was the one that wanted a child. And so we see Scott and Karen, who are kind of thrown into the deep end a little bit, trying to bring up their daughter in the best way possible. What I found hilarious from the very get-go was just how emotionally ill-equipped both parents are for bringing up a small girl. But they are such good people, right? They are trying to teach their small child about all of the kind of ills of the world. And we are going to see them on a journey in which they kind of have to learn to allow their young girl to be a girl and enjoy her freedom of childhood, which I think is really, really interesting. But of course, the pivotal story here is that of both Jason and Nikki, played once again by Esther Smith and Rafe Spall, who, since the beginning of Trying, are now actually a real couple in real life, expecting their first child. So before we get into the on-screen romance, big congratulations from both of us to them. What are we hoping for from Jason and Nikki going forward?
Yeah, something I've been thinking about going into this season is why we're picking back up with Nikki and Jason at the point that we are. You know, we've seen them go through trying to have a child and coming to the conclusion that they're going to go through the adoption process. We've seen them go through that entire whirlwind and what that was like for them. We've seen them get married. And at the end of season 3, we really just see them attain everything that they've been hoping for. They have these 2 children. They've got their home. They've got their marriage. And in a lot of ways, that's the happy ending, right? That's where the show ends. But instead of it ending, which I'm thankful for, we're going to skip ahead a few years and pick back up with them. And I think the reason that we're picking up with them here is because they're at a crossroads in a lot of ways. That dream that they've attained, we all know this, right? There's no real happily ever after. That dream, as wonderful as it is, isn't always what you expected, right? And so we're catching up with them in that moment when that reality is hitting them. They're being challenged to figure out who they are individually and as a couple outside of their roles as parents. And they're having to contend with the realities of parenting a teenager who's coming to terms with her difficult and painful history. And that's a totally new part of this world that they've entered into, this choice that they've made to adopt, that now they're going to have to face. And I think, honestly, as much as they've been through these past 3 seasons that we've gotten to see them overcome, I think this is going to be their biggest challenge yet. And so we're going to see them really struggle with that and have to work through it. But as we've come to expect from this show, there's plenty of joy in the trying, right? And so I'm very excited to see where this journey takes them. Of course, I hope for a happy ending for Jason and Nikki. Really, I mean, I hope that we get to spend many, many years with them and the show never ends. But for this season in particular, you know, I hope the best for them. I'm very interested to see how they navigate this whole situation, especially with Princess looking for her mother and wanting to connect with her. That's something that obviously is going to be very difficult. But as the caring and kind people that they are and loving parents, I'm sure they're going to do a great job. And again, as hard as it's going to be, we're going to get to see them work through it. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I just want to be able to see that fire kind of relight and then be able to find each other in a different way. There's a really interesting line in the 2nd episode delivered by Ravespall. You're like a feeling, like a warm light. And, you know, again, it talks about not just the relationships that we have with one another from a romantic point of view, but there is something really special about how the generational divide is portrayed, and what we can learn from the generations that have been. But also, you know, it's able to poke fun a little bit at some of the things that we might cringe at when we hear occasionally from our elders. So I really like the balance of this show. I'm really happy with seeing Trying once again return for a 4th season. I think it might be the 4th and final season though, Devon. We'll see. Fingers crossed that's not the case. Really quickly though, quick mention to the original songs throughout this season, written and performed by both Becca and Toby Tripp. There is such a great collection of songs that gel so well with the series, and I think they're the reason why I'm tearing up. I sent you a photo after the 2nd episode and I was gone. So yeah, get the tissues at the ready, and after this podcast, jump into the TV app and check out the first 2 episodes of Trying Season 4 as they debut today on Apple TV Plus across all of your screens.
Well, WWDC is coming up very soon, Sigmund. Of course, we're constantly thinking about what we'd like to see announced at the conference, what we'd like to see come to tvOS. And so today, as we're preparing for WWDC and the lead up to it, we thought we would look back at some of our picks from WWDC's past, things that we've wished for, some things we've gotten, some things we haven't, but just some of the things that we're hoping to see in tvOS this year. Now, if the rumors are to be believed, this WWDC is going to be particularly AI heavy, with Apple really investing in that technology. And that's something that we haven't talked about before in our wishes. We'll see if any of those come up next week. But there was a pretty big conversation just yesterday over AI and technology and the creative industry. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I feel like this is actually kind of carrying on from the event that we had recently with the Crush ad as well. OpenAI, supposedly in talks to be Apple's chosen partner for some AI aspects at this year's Worldwide Developers Conference. And seeing how many times I've mentioned the film Her on this podcast, we could not talk about ChatGPT 4.0 and the conversational aspects of the new model. Spike Jonze' 10-year-old film that predicted how our relationship with technology would go to another level entirely, and the fact that OpenAI's Sam Altman seems to have fetishized the film whilst not necessarily taking in its third act, even going as far to take a voice that sounds almost identical to that as the AI depicted in the film called Samantha for the Sky voice. Now, Samantha was played by Scarlett Johansson in the film, and even after Johansson declined an approach to use her voice with her permission, that voice is out there. Here's what the beloved actress had to say about the situation this week in a statement read by OpenAI's Sky.
Last September, I received an offer from Sam Altman, who wanted to hire me to voice the current ChatGPT 4.0 system. He told me that he felt that by my voicing the system, I could bridge the gap between tech companies and creatives and help consumers to feel comfortable with the seismic shift concerning humans and AI. He said he felt that my voice would be comforting to people. After much consideration, and for personal reasons, I declined the offer. 9 months later, my friends, family, and the general public all noted how much the newest system named Sky sounded like me. When I heard the release demo, I was shocked, angered, and in disbelief that Mr. Altman would pursue a voice that sounded so eerily similar to mine that my closest friends and news outlets could not tell the difference. Mr. Altman even insinuated that the similarity was intentional, tweeting a single word, her, a reference to the film in which I voiced a chat system, Samantha, who forms an intimate relationship with a human. 2 days before the ChatGPT 4.0 demo was released, Mr. Altman contacted my agent asking me to reconsider. Before we could connect, the system was out there. As a result of their actions, I was forced to hire legal counsel, who wrote 2 letters to Mr. Altman and OpenAI, setting out what they had done and asking them to detail the exact process by which they created the Sky voice. Consequently, OpenAI reluctantly agreed to take down the Sky voice. In a time when we are all grappling with deepfakes and the protection of our own likeness, our own work, our own identities, I believe these are questions that deserve absolute clarity. I look forward to resolution in the form of transparency and the passage of appropriate legislation to help ensure that individual rights are protected.
Now, I think you'll agree, Devon, that sounded like Scarlett Johansson reading Scarlett Johansson's statement. What are your thoughts on this? And where do Apple, do you think, need to tread a little carefully in a few weeks' time?
Well, I have to be honest, Sigmund. I had not heard this particular voice from OpenAI yet. I hadn't seen the demo that everyone was talking about of how lifelike it sounded and, just how advanced it was. And I've got to admit, hearing that demo, it definitely does sound like some amazing technology. But the other side of that conversation, of course, is, wow, that sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson. And until this statement, we didn't know for sure, had she provided her voice? Is this something that she was collaborating with them with? And the answer obviously now is no, she does not want to be a part of this. And despite the fact that she turned them down, they blatantly went, and I'm not sure exactly how they did this, if they used someone with a similar voice or what they were doing. She's actually calling for them to be more transparent about how this voice even came to be created. That's part of what she's asking for. But regardless, the end result is someone who did not want their voice used in a certain way is now hearing something very, very similar to their voice being used in this way. And it's blatant. And when I heard it, again, this statement was the first time I heard this model being used, and I was angered. And I think anyone who's gone through what Scarlett Johansson has gone through here would rightfully be upset and take steps to protect their voice. That's, something that she should have control over. And it's really just, the word that comes to mind, honestly, is just blatant, that they would just take somebody's voice and use it against their will. The fact that even just a couple days before the demo, they were reaching back out, to me sounds like trying to cover their tracks. Maybe they could get this last second contract to cover the work that they've already done on this voice. I understand the desire to have her do this because, in the movie Her, I think that's something that people are familiar with, maybe even find comforting and approachable. And when you're introducing this new technology that could scare people, you want to make it in a way that's approachable. But when someone tells you, no, I don't want to take part in your thing, you have to respect that. You don't just go behind their back and work around them. And so, we've heard that they're taking down the Sky voice, that it's not going to be used, but that's just damage control at this point for something that never should have seen the light of day. And so it really is it's bad press for OpenAI. It's, a lot of people are upset. It's probably going to end up being a lawsuit, something they're going to have to deal with. And now we're on the eve of Apple potentially announcing some kind of partnership with them to power some features in iOS 18. And, you have to be careful about who you make deals with.
And on the verge of launching an Apple original film starring none other than Scarlett Johansson.
Exactly. Apple has these relationships with creators. That is a huge part of their success up to this point, going all the way back to the iPod with music and probably even further back than that. Honestly, that's just kind of, I'm a younger Apple fan. I guess that's where I start when I go back to that. But all the way up to Apple TV Plus. Now, you're right. They have a relationship with Scarlett Johansson, and they're kind of, hopefully not being drawn into the middle of this, but they have a relationship with both parties. And this is something that I think Apple needs to make sure they're prioritizing, those relationships with creatives over any other sort of partnership getting into this AI game. That includes, of course, the sourcing for the models. We've had a lot of issues with artists and writers taking issue with that. We hear that Apple may be taking a different approach there as far as licensing sources and trying to make things right on that end. But when it comes to who they're partnering with, they have to be careful as well. And so, I don't know exactly what can be done at this point if the contracts are signed, but also too, if Apple is going to be partnering with OpenAI, I feel like we say this a lot, but Apple throws a lot of weight, or they can when they want to. And so they have an opportunity here to hopefully bridge some of this gap between the AI community and the creative community and make it right, make sure people are getting paid for their work and that things that they don't want involved aren't being involved. And so I hope that we see that. I don't want to put all of that on Apple, but to the extent that they're able to, I hope that they do, and especially in any work that Apple itself is doing in AI, we hope to see them doing right by creatives, because Apple's a company that loves creative people, that collaborates with them constantly. It benefits from those collaborations. And we obviously, as fans of Apple TV and Apple TV Plus, we want to see that continue.
Well, I think in terms of AI and on machine learning, we have quite a few positive possible examples here in our wishes for tvOS from the last year or so. We're going to start with some developer wishes from last year. They started with a big kind of point of contention for the user experience on Apple TV and partnerships. The Apple TV probably relies on partnerships more than any other hardware that Apple offers, especially when it comes to media partnerships. The reluctance of third-party apps to adopt multi-user switching, it's been introduced twice by Apple already, is a bit of a shocker here. So one of the things that I think we still need to see, and hopefully this is the year, is an update to the TV app terms to include multi-user support, which is now functioned through iCloud keychain. So nice and easy to do because it can save from your iOS device when you choose the profile, when you log in. And we don't want to see those multiple profiles, especially for those that rely on their voice with HomePod and Siri. Getting to that login screen means that you kind of hit a wall. and there's no way of being able to play back something even if you just request a title, and then Disney Plus, for example, starts up and you're at a dead end. So that was the biggest thing that I think we want to see. None of the big media companies have taken it upon themselves to adopt multi-user. Once again, big shout out to some of our favorites, TV Launcher, Play as well. They both incorporated user switching through user profiles via iCloud. And that request is quickly followed on by new and enhanced developer APIs, including multi-view, two-way sync between UpNext and tracking apps, multi-device experiences outside of Apple TV Plus. We kind of saw a little bit of that last year, didn't we, Devon?
We saw an API for it for sure. The only actual application of it we did cover on here, I think, was just a test app, a personal app that someone had made for themselves. I don't know that we've seen anything actually on the App Store that's taking advantage of this, but it is there, which is great to see that other developers outside of Apple will be able to create these multi-device experiences. But these other APIs, multi-view and two-way sync of your UpNext queue, I think these are ones that would be really great for the tvOS ecosystem as well, something that developers would definitely take advantage of. And if you haven't caught on the theme already with these first 2 points, the things that have come at least, it seems like indie developers are the ones who really latch onto them first. And so we want to see indie developers supported with the APIs that are available, and then hopefully the bigger developers will come in and take advantage of them as well. The final thing we're hoping for in terms of developer wishes was tools that create spaces for other app categories. We want to see the tvOS App Store continue to grow and incorporate more and more types of apps that you can have up on the big screen. Last year, we saw VPN support and continuity camera come to the Apple TV. And those were 2 wishes that we got from some social media posts and our 2022 list that made it in last year, as was the inclusion of FaceTime calling. So there are a couple of new categories, which are great. We've seen video conferencing apps come to tvOS, which is awesome. We've seen way more VPN apps come to tvOS than I was expecting. And so that's been great to see. So yeah, I think we're going to put a check mark on that one, but again, continue to push for more and more categories of apps on the Apple TV. We would just want to see that continue to grow and see that ecosystem thrive.
Yeah, the continuity camera edition and FaceTime calling was something that I had asked for in a social media post 1 year earlier. And it was really part of our focus last year, which was on the wow factor. What could you do on the Apple TV platform and tvOS that others simply cannot because they don't necessarily have the full stack and ecosystem to support it? I think that's well represented. So, some wishes that we had. A customization of the home screen based on profile, like a focus implementation on iOS. So if I logged in, for example, and I'm a football fan, I'd have the football apps up top. My mum, who's more into home shopping networks and stuff, would have QVC up top, and that to me just sounds like something quite simple. It feels like something that should have probably come when multi-user was first introduced a number of years ago. So hopefully this is the year for that. When it comes to the wow factor, what was your first pick for tvOS last year?
Well, mine's a little bit more subtle, Sigmund, but I think what would bring a lot of wow factor, especially for families, would be screen time support on tvOS and the ability to track, especially like how much time different people are using in the app and having all that report back to the iPhone. Screen time is a really great system for families to keep things in line and make sure kids are not spending more time on devices than they're supposed to and spending time where they're supposed to on those devices, and seeing more robust support on that on tvOS, I think, would be something that a lot of people would benefit from.
Absolutely. I think also, just being able to see how much time you're spending in an app and whether or not that subscription is working out for you is a great tool that we see on pretty much every other platform of Apple's. And this is the one where I think it makes the most sense. And then, of course, not having the TV there, do you really know what your actual screen time is and how healthy things are for you on that usage? Probably not. Now, For me, more customization. I said customization in Control Center and the ability to open Control Center up to third-party apps. Now, we got quite a big change when it came to Control Center this year, and there is maybe a little bit of customizability with regard to that one accessibility function button, which you could choose what it was going to be, but nowhere near what we're hoping for. Maybe we'll see something. Maybe we'll see a record button. We'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, a lot had changed with Control Center this last year. And initially, I was really into it. I'm not sure whether or not this was the most positive of changes, because everything is, whilst it's easily accessible, it's very compact. And I don't know if, for those that are new to Apple TV, if that layout is a little user hostile. Obviously nice and easy for us because we're wizards with Apple TV, and we're the kind of users who will jump into Control Center. But for other generations that aren't so tech savvy, I wonder if maybe it was a little bit too much.
Well, that's where customization could come in handy as well, just kind of turning off the things you don't need and making it exactly what you want. And then for those like us who want more power user features up there as well, we could have that. So kind of a two-sided coin customization. So we'll continue to hold out hope for that. I wanted to see a settings app redesign in the style of the new Apple TV app. I really just want to see that design language come to the rest of the OS. I think we'll see it roll out over time. But the settings app in particular, I think needs some love. When I go in there to adjust some settings, it feels like going back in time to even like pre-tvOS days. And so we haven't seen that yet. But again, as the new design language of the Apple TV app rolls out throughout the OS, I have to believe it's going to come to settings eventually.
Yeah. One thing in settings, it's still strange and a bit alien to me where software update is in comparison to every other platform, right? And hopefully that can be fixed this year. The other thing I'd like to see fixed within settings app is where you go into storage and you have a look. There isn't anything indicating your overall remaining storage, just how much storage each app is taking, and there is no inbuilt calculator on tvOS, and I don't want one, Apple. I just want you to be able to calculate on your own behalf for me how much capacity I've got left on the Apple TV. And one of the reasons that maybe we don't see that is because there is constant offloading happening with certain apps, and that might be the reason why, but nevertheless, I'd like to see it happen. Also, when it comes to settings and information about our usage, app data usage information, like on iOS, right? I want to be able to see what data each app is taking, and that might not be necessarily so important in the home with home broadband for people that have unlimited data, but not everyone does. And so I think it's important for us to be able to see what's happening there from a data and I guess ecological point of view as well, for those that are eco-conscious and should be. That's another wish that hasn't yet come to fruition, but I would imagine will. In terms of things that did actually come, we're going to talk about Siri very quickly. Oh, Siri. Search results. I wanted there to be an amalgamation really of relevant results from not just movies and TV shows, but music. We did get that. When you search for something, you'll get a tab and you can switch over to music and you're right away, which is really cool for original soundtracks and that kind of thing. So a win there. Furthermore, Siri integration with connected HomePods with a visual response and global results across devices. Right now, if you ask for something, even if your HomePods are connected to the Apple TV, the HomePods will answer, but you'll get no visual feedback on Apple TV because they are basically their own island, so to speak. All the devices are. And so I really want to be able to see that come to fruition, again, it's just a really strange oversight and really interesting decision that was made for that not just to be the general interaction from the get-go. And that feels really broken. So hopefully, again, this year we see that. And then something a little bit out there. One of the cool features of tvOS is the ability to take any standard remote and be able to program that to be able to control your Apple TV. But, of course, not every remote have all of the capable microphones to be able to talk to Siri. But if you've got HomePods, or you've got a HomePod in the room, there should be an ability to be able to program one button on your remote that then triggers Siri on a HomePod, and therefore you regain that functionality. I think that's something that could be done quite easily, seeing as we see this Siri relay with not just Ecobee thermostats, but now Denon speakers. So fingers crossed that's opened up on a whole new level this year. And continuing on the microphone side of things, audio chat via AirPods for Apple Arcade games or SharePlay calls. Well, I don't think we expected continuity camera and FaceTime calls. This is a green tick amongst that wish, so that can be taken off. But yeah, more and more, please, with AirPods and audio and what they can do.
Well, that's very cool. We love to see these green checks on our list, Sigmund, and see our wish list get ever so slightly shorter. But the wish list continues on. My next one has to do with the integration between the Apple TV and Home. Of course, the Apple TV shows up in the Home app. There are certain controls that you can do there. The Apple TV works as a home hub, but there's no way to update the software for your Apple TV from the Home app, and I feel like that's an oversight. That's where you go to update your HomePods, but for some reason you can't do the Apple TV there. So I want to be able to manage the tvOS software in the Home, and overall just better integration, I think, between the Apple TV and Home. Of course, they're a category now on Apple's website, TV and Home, and they really do see the TV as the center of their home strategy. And so I just want to see that strategy continue to grow, and with Apple TV at the center of it.
Couldn't agree more. And kind of going a little bit further into it, home automations, including those based on the metadata of content or the experience being played back, right? So soothing lights maybe during a meditation, lights going up at the end of the film, but not up if there's a post-credit scene in that particular film. Something that we already see via Kaleidoscope, and I believe is coming to other smart TV platforms in the near future.
Now, you had some fun experiments with this year, Sigmund. This is not a check on our list, but with Home Assistant, you were able to recreate a lot of this stuff and actually interact with it with shortcuts. So the possibilities are there. We just like to see some first-party solutions from Apple coming as well.
And another thing I wouldn't mind seeing is Apple TV multi-sync, right? So we've got permanent audio zones that we can switch to in Control Center. I want to be able to see permanent video zones so that if we're in a situation where it's Super Bowl and people are working in the kitchen, people are out in the yard, people are in the living room, everything is still synced up nicely. And really, from a technological aspect, this is something that could be done with SharePlay, but with a little bit of latency, and then you're using all of that data to make everything happen. But on a network, I'd imagine this would be fairly easy, although SharePlay itself is a technical marvel. So to be able to adapt that into something that works on the network, I think is something that could be really, really helpful for some people. In terms of automation, you talked about shortcuts. You know, we got a few shortcut actions when shortcuts were first announced. There's been nothing since. So we've got a few shortcut actions for the remote app, nothing for the TV app. Although there were ways of being able to force that for a little amount of time. So it's definitely possible to be able to have a specific like children's program, for example, be put into an automation. That'd be really, really cool. But yeah, nothing as of yet. So fingers crossed that will happen. Switching away, let's talk about the main thing that I think we do on the Apple TV, and that is watch videos, isn't it? So the video player is very, very important. And one of the things that I think is going to be super important from a ecological point of view and, Apple's green initiative is something that's twofold, really. Offline downloads. So I think in terms of offline downloads, we'd get better quality in terms of not only video, but maybe also audio with less compression on that side of things, which would be really suitable for home theaters. And I think it would benefit the TV app experience as well for those that like to purchase their films and grow their libraries, but also those that like to subscribe to Apple channels. They could introduce smart downloads as well. And that's where I think maybe artificial intelligence could come in this year on tvOS. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, I'm a creature of habit. I watch The Equalizer every Monday at 6:30 p.m. And my Apple TV can know that and have it ready for me so that I don't have to stream it. I can have it downloaded, and could also take into account when energy is more eco-friendly and do the download then rather than, during peak times, which is usually when I'm at home doing stuff. So yeah, I think this would be a great application for AI. It would just make the Apple TV experience that much more magical because you get that full quality without having to wait for buffering, and it would all just happen for you.
Next on the list, multi-screen sync between iPads and iPhones without the need for FaceTime video. That is possible. You can do that via iMessage, right? So that's a tick, although maybe not necessarily what I was going for. In particular, I'm thinking more again on the network, but it's nice to see that this is possible via SharePlay. And I'm thinking on an accessibility level here. So, for example, maybe someone who has limited vision is able to watch on their iPad almost pressed up against their face, or they need subtitles and they don't necessarily want that to be a hindrance to anyone else. That's where I'm kind of going with this, and that ties in with my next pick, which is audio out to multiple destinations for accessibility, but also for bilingual watching. One person may be watching in Spanish, maybe one is watching in English, or maybe you've got a whole family in the living room and everyone's watching, but one person needs audio description or just needs to be able to hear clearer via their headphones. Again, that's not something that's come. We did see some additions to AirPods and playback on AirPods last year with the addition of spatial audio for 2 sets of AirPods. So that's ticked off the list. I really hope they do something special here from an accessibility point of view this year. Fingers crossed, because this has been a running wish list item for a number of years now, Devon.
I agree with you, and I feel like SharePlay really sets the foundation for a lot of these things. And there was a time when SharePlay felt like just a far-flung dream, right? So we've come this far. We just need to take it the next step, and I hope and believe that we will, and that'll be on our list going into WWDC this year. Now, you've had lots of multi-picks, Sigmund. I'm going to throw in another multi-pick as well. Multiview on Apple TV. And, of course, we actually did get Multiview in the TV app for sports, so we're going to call that a check mark in some sense. You can watch up to 4 different sports streams at a time, so you can mix and match your Friday Night Baseball and your MLS Season Pass streams. That's really, really great. But, of course, we want to take it even further. This is what happens when you give us something. We want to take it to the next step, right? And so we want to see multi-view for different sources within tvOS for other apps to be able to vend their streams to the video player in a multi-view so that you've got Peacock on one and you've got Paramount Plus on another, and you've got your Friday Night Baseball. But, especially for sports fans, I think that this is something that could really come in handy. But there are other applications too. I mean, you've got situations where you want to watch one thing and your kid wants to watch something, or something like that. Maybe this could come in handy. So, yeah, I think they've got the foundation again with Multiview in the TV app for sports, but we need to just see it go system-wide.
Yeah, and, we're talking about foundational technology and Apple really not doing too much with it. One of the things that was introduced a number of years ago that really hasn't seen any love is picture-in-picture. Mm-hmm. And there is a big use case for that. And I'm going to keep pushing it. And that is American Sign Language and British Sign Language support. As an extra, we get the special ASL version of Apple's Keynotes in the TV app. And last year, we saw Max do it for the release of the Barbie movie. I was really hoping that they were going to continue that forward, but it didn't happen, unfortunately, which, again, is something that I hope we see. It's kind of a mainstay tradition, really, for the BBC over in the UK that do offer that, at least when it comes to terrestrial TV watching, and I believe some platforms. So hopefully we can see Apple do something with that, even if it's just with their original programming. And, you know, we've talked about accessibility and how the TV experience could be more accessible, and AI may come into this as well. That is also subtitles and translation for tvOS for services that don't necessarily offer that to their users. We've seen this technology come to FaceTime in previous years. So it'd be really cool to see this happen with, you know, some modicum of accuracy on tvOS and pre-recorded video content, and maybe even live TV.
Another thing I would love to see come to the Apple TV is Fitness Plus, offering multiple person workouts at the same time, so you're not having to use an iPhone with SharePlay or something like that. People like to work out together in the same space. It's very motivating, and I know that's something I've done a lot, and it's a little bit of a hassle try to get it set up for multiple people. If the Apple TV could just connect with multiple people's Apple Watches and just vend that information, I think that would be ideal.
You want to be able to display both heart rates and see who's working harder.
Exactly.
Right? Especially the competitive amongst us. From an Apple Watch point of view, you know, the Apple Watch has had the U1 chip. Does it have the U2 chip? I'm not too sure, but definitely the U1 chip on board. And really nothing's been done with that technology when it comes to ultra wideband in terms of user detection around the house. And that is something I'd love to see. I'd love to see the Apple Watch be used for detection for who's in the room, and maybe then we can have like an auto login. Maybe that's asking for too much, Devon, but that is on our list. It's all fun and games, really, isn't it, with this list? And talking of games, Game Center, the revamp that I think we've all been hoping for. You know, you can get into Game Center through games, but there isn't this central hub for games beyond Apple Arcade. Everything is kind of segmented, and it's just a bit of a chore, really, to find everything in one place. And I think that could really boost being able to just jump into a game, get a audio or video chat going. At the moment, everything seems to be very, okay, I need to do this, then I now have to launch that. So to bring that all together, I think would be really helpful. And I am someone that chases achievements, so just to kind of have that top and center with my contacts list on one side and everyone else, and just be able to jump into a call and start a game, I think would be amazing. And I'd also like to be able to record a moment where maybe I'm able to beat you at something, Devon. You normally get the upper hand when it comes to Apple Arcade games. But Replay Kit is something that has been on Apple TV for a number of years. I think like tvOS 15 I think tvOS 13, tvOS 12, that far back. And yet no one really knows about it because it hasn't really been pushed from developers to do it. Battle Royale, which used to be on Apple Arcade, used to give you this option to be able to record. And it was very, very cool because then there was a button to airdrop that recording to a nearby Mac, iPhone or iPad. And then from there you could upload it to social media, edit it, do whatever you wanted to. And so beyond having like a full editing suite on Apple TV. Don't see that happening. A way of being able to bring Replay Kit front and center, maybe as part of Control Center, would be very, very cool, and is the final tvOS wish from last year at least. But of course, the wishes don't end there, because we got some listener submissions as well, Devon.
We do. We always want to make sure we share these listener submissions because they have great ideas in addition to our lists. And so we've got a handful here. Big screen collaboration, like a digital whiteboard that came in the form of Freeform on Vision OS, but it'd be great to have on Apple TV as well. A tvOS version of Freeform sounds actually pretty amazing. So I hope to see that. HDMI 2.1 auto low latency support. We have lots of different settings in tvOS to make sure things are set up exactly the way they're supposed to be between your Apple TV and your TV set, and that would be a great thing to add as well. HomePod surround sound. We want our HomePod minis as the rear speakers. Apple's had a patent for this for so long and haven't acted on it, and we just have to hope that it's coming, and we're going to keep it on our list until it does. The option to use AirPlay 2 speakers as your default output for your Apple TV. We can do it with HomePods, but we'd love to see it come to other AirPlay 2 speakers as well. I think this was a little more forgivable when AirPlay 2 was rolling out and there weren't as many AirPlay 2 speakers, but there are so many of them now that really would be nice to be able to set those as your default. Haptic support in more games. Apple's rolling out haptics everywhere. It's even in your Apple Pencil now. So when you're gaming on the Apple TV, of course, we want to see haptic support everywhere. So Apple, I think, makes those APIs pretty accessible, but anything they can do to continue to push that on the developer side and make it easier. And again, could be a good application for AI there, possibly. Support for 120 hertz. Sigmund, we're never going to have enough hertz. So we got to just keep pushing it. The displays keep getting better, and so the Apple TV's capabilities we want to see continue as well. Finally, our listeners sent in the desire to see SwiftUI improve for Apple TV. I think that's just a general developer wish. You know, that's something that Apple's continuing to iterate on, and I feel like SwiftUI is something that, while it does open up a lot of possibilities for developers, it can also create a lot of frustrations. And so we're an Apple TV podcast, and so especially on Apple TV, we hope to see SwiftUI continue to improve so that we can see more developers and a wider array of developers getting into tvOS development. Great list of wishes from our listeners. We'd love to hear what you're hoping for WWDC, so do be sure to send those in to us as we continue to compile these lists. Shall we look at our wishes from last year for the TV app, Sigmund?
Let's do it.
I feel like we need a sound effect for this one. Maybe just the to-dum sound would be great, because we bring this up a lot, but I'm never going to give up on it, Sigmund. I want to see Netflix integration come to the TV app. I want my Netflix series in my up next queue. Okay, and that's enough on that. We know that's a wish, and when it happens, we're going to throw a party and maybe have a whole episode about it.
With regard to TV app wishes, I think my first wish from last year was up next queue prioritization, right? A way of being able to feature our chosen content rather than the featured row, and the countless advertising that we see for shows that we're maybe not interested in, for shows that we've already seen. So really a way of being able to not only do that, but also better determine what the user has previously watched, so not to recommend again and kind of waste that space, right?
Of course. You know, I watch so much Apple TV Plus. We kind of have to. It's part of our jobs, right? And I see those recommendations at the top of the TV app. I'm like, watch that. So yeah, I would love to see those filtered out automatically based on your watch history. Now, once we get the up next queue all the way up to the top where it belongs, I want to be able to customize it, be able to reorder things in the queue, filter and sort it, and get it exactly the way I want. There are certain things about the up next queue that I love. I love the way it shows new episodes of shows I'm currently watching at the beginning, but I feel like there are certain things that I wish I could push back to the back, especially like upcoming titles that aren't coming for a while, or rewatches that I'm doing. I would love those to be further back so I could make room for newer content at the front. So any control over the up next queue and being able to reorder it, that would be welcomed. I'd also love the ability to create multiple up next queues. We talk about this a lot, how, you know, the TV is a shared device and we're not always watching alone. So I've got my up next queue, but I also have shows that I watch with my partner. And so I'd love to be able to have a different up next queue for when we're watching together, kind of like you have the For All of You row. I'd like to be able to kind of create a curated list of up next picks for that scenario as well. One thing I love about the TV app is their curated collections, and I would love to see them take that even further. Kind of like on Apple Music when you have the Essentials playlist for different artists. I would love something like that for different creators, for actors and writers and directors. If there's someone I want to do a deep dive on, to have that as a resource right there in the Apple TV app, and just be able to hit play on an essential films list for them, I think that would be a really great addition. Of course, we always want to see more integration between the TV app and Apple's other services like soundtracks and podcasts and books. Now, we see some of this with Apple TV Plus. I feel like we've actually seen less of this as of late. I really missed the For All Mankind podcast for this last season. And of course, that wasn't in the TV app because there wasn't a new season. That's a separate complaint, but I just had to throw that in there. But I would love to see the ability for third parties like Max and other streaming services to be able to plug their podcasts and their accompanying content as well. So to be able to give creators the ability just to say, hey, Apple's got all these other great storefronts and there's other things that you can access and even purchase to go along with this series that you're enjoying or this film that you're enjoying. So having that as an option for other creators and pushing it even more with Apple TV Plus shows and movies as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of third-party apps, it pushes people to kind of jump out of their menu systems and back into the TV app to be able to access the extras that third-party apps just aren't able to offer the integrations because, once again, they don't have the full stack. I'd like to see the ability to be able to airdrop extras like books, like music, and maybe even, you know, some kind of form of handoff. We've had that between HomePods and music. It'd be really cool to be able to do that with video as well, with the Apple TV and an iOS device, for example. That would be really cool. And a great delivery method, I think, for really, you know, expanding beyond the TV app. The TV app doesn't list the books and everything else on tvOS. It does on iPadOS. So it'd be really cool to be able to see that expansion from the big screen to the smaller screens that we take with us. Now, it's often been noted, you know, the big screen is the silver screen, the movies that we watch, and the small screen has been better known as the screen that we watch our TV shows on. But one thing that's kind of bugged me for a long, long time has been the inability to be able to purchase TV shows in 4K on Apple TV, whereas they are available in 4K on the likes of Amazon's Prime Video store, Microsoft's store, even Vudu. So that's something I'd love to see happen as someone that is an avid collector of digital content within the TV app. And my library is large. When it comes to TV shows and how they are displayed, there is like a really weird lack of consistency, even with the TV app revamp that we saw at the end of last year. And that is that when you look at TV shows, with some box sets, you'll get a whole line of episodes that aren't segmented into seasons. But then if you go into the TV app and the search element of the TV app, it's how you would expect it to be laid out. And that's something that, again, it's been a long-term gripe. Hopefully that's something that can be sorted out. When it comes to the library tab as well, when you look at your purchase history, you only get the most recent 10 or so titles. I'd like to see that be more consistent with the TV app on macOS, for example, which gives you a full breakdown. I went all the way back to my very first purchase and I can see exactly what I bought when I bought it. I think that just lends itself really well to the TV app, especially if you're an avid purchaser and you purchased films many moons ago that you never actually got round to watching after seeing them on sale. A problem that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Now, whilst most of my library I will call via Siri, There are certain titles I know of that I have to go to the library tab to source and play back because they may have changed distributor, or a box set that I bought that was complete back then, they would revamp the show, bring it back, and that box set would be replaced by a new one. And when that happens, you can't call the playback via Siri because that listing has gone from the storefront and therefore also been removed from Siri's search results. I would like for Apple to finally fix this so that my purchases, whether it's from 6 months ago or 6 years ago, still have the same functionality that was sold to me when I got in on Apple TV and tvOS all the way back in 2015. From a TV perspective, I'd also like to see TV shows be given the same respect in regard to extras. There are plenty of commentaries out there and extras that we just do not see on the TV app, which we see on other storefronts or on physical media. The TV show is just as important as the big screen feature these days, maybe even more so. And I think they should be both held in the same regard in the TV app, because we spend the same dollars and the same British pounds on both types of content. And lastly, for some customization, being able to sort the library, maybe, for example, Star Wars. Do you want the story in chronological order? Do you want the story in the way that it was released, which is here, there, and everywhere? The ability to be able to change the order and set groups is something that Vudu have been offering for years. I'd like to see that come to the TV app and the library section, along with playlists for maybe scenes or chapters from purchase libraries. So you've got a nice playlist of all of your favorite scenes that you really want to show off your home cinema with. Again, this is something that's offered by Kaleidoscape. Love to see Apple do something along those lines. The metadata is already there for it. And lastly, when it comes to the TV experience, of course, we always talk about on demand, but there is live TV hidden away in the TV app. We've got live news. We've got the Apple Music channel. I think it's time for Apple to finally get into the live TV game. We have hints of that with some of the APIs that were released with regard to advertising and potential partnerships. So the groundwork is there. But why I think this is important is, an EPG for live scheduled programming is a way that traditionally has been the center of the TV experience. And that's just been something that's completely been lacking. We watch live sports. There's lots of live content on the TV app. And I wonder if they could use this to their advantage by having a VOD release schedule in there for being able to create water cooler moments and online social media traction for Apple Originals. But also, there may be a possibility here where you have an ad-supported Apple TV Plus streaming channel, which would be really good for promotion and really showing this growth in Apple's original catalogue. And I could imagine third-party apps could really take advantage of this as well.
Oh, for sure. We see the plethora of fast channels that are in streaming now, and people love them. And I have to say, I've spent a little bit of time with them, and I see the appeal of just being able to turn something on and enjoy a certain category of programming, right, with some ads in there as well to keep it free. But to support that in the TV app, and maybe even for Apple to take part of it. So, they do free premieres in the TV app where you can just try out the first episode of so many series, but why not throw that on a live channel and get people trying things out that way, and then maybe subscribe to the service later on. Well, this is a great list of picks, Sigmund. Of course, these are our picks actually from last year, and so we've got more to share in the coming weeks for this year, but we'll be keeping an eye out for all of these and more with tvOS 18 when it's announced at WWDC. Now, in the meantime, there is an update for your Apple TV Now Apple, on the day of recording, released tvOS 17.5.1 with some important bug fixes. Like we talked about with tvOS 17.5, it's important to keep your Apple TV up to date. So be sure to go into Settings, System, Software Update, and update your Apple TV there. Hopefully this time next year, it'll be in the general section. In terms of new features for Apple's platforms, they like to pre-announce before WWDC a selection of accessibility features that are coming over the next year. They do this each year in commemoration of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which was last Thursday. I really like this tradition, Sigmund, this annual preview of what to come. It really gives these accessibility features a chance to shine, and it also just showcases this whole other side of Apple's development work that's so incredible. Really just talented and intelligent people putting so much work into making Apple's platforms accessible to so many more people in so many more ways. And so we wanted to shout out a selection of these as well. First of all, eye tracking coming to iOS and iPadOS, where you'll be able to control these systems with your eyes and then just stare at something to select it and move on. This is probably technology from visionOS being applied to these systems, but to be able to do it with just the front-facing camera and Face ID array on an iPhone or iPad really is amazing, and I feel like it's going to be really great for so many people. Then there's vocal shortcuts, which are custom utterances that launch shortcuts and other tasks. This is set up similar to personal voice, where you actually go ahead and record what you want that sound to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a word in your language. It can just be a sound that you make. And then your device will be listening for it the way it listens for your assistant trigger word. And when you make this custom vocal shortcut, it will run it for you, which is very, very cool. Music haptics allow users to feel songs streamed via Apple Music. And so those who would benefit from that extra added experience of having a taptic feel along with the music, they'll be able to take advantage of that. And there's an API for this for other developers to implement in their apps as well. CarPlay is seeing some huge accessibility changes, including sound recognition for car horns and sirens. So if your system picks up on something happening around you, it can let you know. Voice control, not just via Siri, but for the UI of CarPlay itself to navigate the screens and the apps there. Color filters for those who need to be able to adjust the color on their screens to be able to see and understand what they see. And larger text sizes and bold text options. This is pretty cool, Sigmund. Vehicle motion cues. This is going to be on especially the iPhone, but other devices that you use in the car as well. This is a series of dots that sit on the edge of your device and animate as the vehicle moves to counteract the cause of motion sickness. And so it's kind of trying to alleviate that dissonance between what your body's feeling and what your eyes are seeing when you're staring at a screen. I think that's very cool, and it's going to open up the ability to use devices in the car to a lot of people. On visionOS, there are a bunch of accessibility updates coming, including live captions, the ability to move the placement of captions in immersive video, which is great, support for more hearing devices and cochlear implants, and some features that we've seen on other platforms like reduced transparency, smart invert, and one of our favorites, Sigmund, dim flashing lights. Very cool to see those coming to visionOS. There are a slew of other updates. For the total overview, check out John's overview on Mac Stories. We'll link to that in the show notes. And alongside all of this, Apple's doing some celebratory collections across their storefronts, including a new collection in the TV app called Remaking the World, which honors trailblazing creators, performers, and activists who passionately share the experiences of people with disabilities, inviting viewers to envision a reality where everyone is empowered to add their voice to the greater human story.
Yeah, just a great amount of effort that goes into accessibility every year. We, of course, are always wanting more, but the things that Apple's teams come up with each year just absolutely blow my mind, because I wouldn't have even thought of some of these. I think the biggest one for me is going to be vehicle motion cues this year. So, you know, again, accessibility isn't necessarily about disability. So there is something here for everyone. And I think that's a very important thing to mention as we draw that to a close. Now, as for this week, moving away from software into hardware, we got the long-awaited announcement of Sonos and their Ace headphones, their first headphones coming to the market. They feature 2 custom 40mm drivers with support for Dolby Atmos and lossless audio, Bluetooth and USB-C connectivity with a USB-C to 3.5mm cable included. They'll also have active noise cancellation and an aware mode, physical controls for controlling volume, playback and noise cancellation, and coming later in the year, True Cinema, a feature that creates better surround sound by mapping the listener's environment, or staying true to a poorly treated room, which I thought was an interesting choice there. During a briefing that I had, they were talking about echo and reverb in a room, and rather than cutting it out, they wanted to be able to have that true life experience even when you're wearing headphones, which again is a choice. There's some clever stuff going on here with regard to their spatial and binaural audio, which takes 2 streamed versions of stereo. I guess a bit like tandem OLED, right? It's taking 2 lots of something and essentially upmixing that stereo to spatial audio. So it's the audio equivalent, right, in a roundabout way. There's also 3D positional rendering for head movement. That's up, down, left, and right, which is kind of cool. And there's going to be some tuning for content with partnered creators to honor the creator intent. Because when you're, of course, up mixing and doing different things with the audio, you can, of course, stray well away from that intent. So that's interesting to know. The headphones are going to integrate with the ARC soundbar, allowing you to listen to your TV's audio via the headphones. And they're going to integrate with both the Beam and the Ray in the future. The more budget-friendly products within Sonos's range of soundbars. 30 hours of battery life, non-folding design, but come with a travel case. They're launching on June 5th for $449 and will come in 2 colours, black and soft white. And I've been very, very excited about the Sonos Ace, but I've got to tell you, I'm a little bit disappointed. And there are a few reasons for that, Devon. The first is that you can only pair 1 pair of these Sonos Ace headphones in a home theatre setting. So it's literally a solo experience here. And there is something that's quite lacking for a Sonos pair of headphones. They're not using Wi-Fi other than to pair to your soundbar, which then is able to extract what your room sounds like and do the magic. It is a Bluetooth pair of headphones predominantly. And considering they're Sonos headphones and the Sonos speaker range has always been something that's been interoperable, you know, you just buy Sonos speakers and they're part of your setup. There is no multiple audio out mode, meaning that, you know, you can't have audio going through the speakers and then also going through your headphones at the same time, which is one of the wishes that we had for tvOS last year that we've just recapped. And I think the disappointment comes for me is that Sonos, they are a much celebrated company, lots of fandom there, and their sole focus is on audio. And I can say that the briefing that I got to witness went more from a product briefing to it felt like a product round table, right, as to what wasn't included this time around. So it's disappointing because I think competition is really, really important, and obviously I was really hoping that Sonos would push the envelope and then Apple and everyone else would have to play catch up with certain features. But who knows? We'll have to see what Apple have up their sleeve in a few weeks' time.
Most definitely. Moving from hardware into software now, we talked last week about Comcast Stream Saver package, which is a bundling of Peacock, Netflix, and Apple TV Plus that they announced at their investor conference last week. Well, we found out this week that it will actually be available to customers starting next week. It will cost $15 a month as an add-on to Comcast TV and broadband services, which is quite a savings over subscribing to those services individually. And for Comcast Now TV subscribers, they can upgrade their service, which already features Peacock, to include Netflix and Apple TV Plus for additional $10 a month. So they're delivering on that bundling savings like they said. Again, this is limited just to Comcast subscribers, so if they're not in your area or, your continent, Sigmund, unfortunately you can't take advantage of this bundle. But for those who are Comcast subscribers and are willing to jump into another bundle to get access to these streaming services at a cheaper price, this seems like a pretty good deal.
2 new emulators are now available on the App Store. They include PPSSPP, a PSP emulator for iPhone and iPad, that being, of course, the PlayStation Portable. I'm not too sure what the added S's and P's are. We'll find out for next week. But also, we saw RetroArch, which supports a variety of classic emulators, including Nintendo, Sega, Atari, and Sony systems, not only on iPhone and iPad, but on Apple TV. And let me just say, very popular. Was number 1 last time I looked on the App Store. It seems to be going between 1 and 2 this weekend, but a real big debut for RetroArch. Now, I did post about RetroArch on socials, and I think it's pretty popular given the interactions this week on that post. I think 1 million views across all social media platforms, which is the first time ever that's happened to me.
Wow.
So thank you for all the notifications, but I'm kind of glad it's stopped now because I can get work done again. And what I will say about RetroArch is it is a little bit convoluted to set up, as you have to download the emulator packages before anything can play. And Delta, an app that we've talked about a number of times, kind of does a much better job of making the process more accessible and easy to understand. However, RetroArch transfers your ROM files over the network to Apple TV via a web browser on another device. You just got to make sure that you're saving to the RetroArch folder, and you should be good to go. A new bit of knowledge that I wasn't aware of is the fact that Apple TV and tvOS offloads a lot of the data from apps to make space, probably kind of going back to when Apple TVs only had like 32 gigabytes of storage and not the 128 that we have now. And so some of your game saves and games may disappear the next time you log into RetroArch. So not the perfect experience, but a great experience overall, especially if you're just wanting to jump in and play one specific game. Yeah, WCW versus NWO all the way for me this week, and Mario Kart. So yeah, I'm happy to get this experience on the big screen at least. Might be a little while before we see Delta come to the Apple TV, given those limitations.
I'm just loving being in this world of emulation on Apple's platform, Sigmund, and amazed to see how many of them are coming so quickly, and the quality of them, and just the diversity of them as well. Seeing one on tvOS is incredible. Of course, Providence is still in the works. We're keeping an eye on that one. We'll keep everyone posted as it comes out on Apple TV, but really is just a fun time to be on the App Store and see this new category just blossoming. Speaking of fun times, this is maybe not necessarily my kind of fun, but I know a lot of people are going to be very excited for this. Ubisoft announced that the next entry in the Assassin's Creed series, Assassin's Creed Shadows, will be available on Apple Silicon Macs on its release day, November 15th. That's pretty incredible. The game will immerse players in 16th century Japan, where they will experience the intertwined stories of Naoi, an adept shinobi assassin from the Iga province, and Yasuke, the powerful samurai of historical legend. Players will discover these characters' personal stories, meet pivotal historical figures, and shape the duo's common destiny as they usher in a new era for Japan. Assassin's Creed Shadows is currently available in the Mac App Store for pre-order for $69.99. I think this is the first time we've seen a big AAA game like this coming to the Mac on day one. Usually Mac players have to wait at least a few months, often longer, to get these titles. But Apple's really been pushing, I think, not only on the technology side, but also in their relationships with these developers to try and get these games sooner. And to me, honestly, this feels like a breakthrough that they are able to get the latest Assassin's Creed on the same day as PC and Steam and all those other platforms.
It's a great step in the right direction. I look forward to playing Assassin's Creed Shadows in my office as will everyone else when it comes to Mac. But, it's coming in November, and there is still a possibility by the end of the year that we see an Apple Silicon-based Apple TV. I think that's really the jump that we're looking towards. Do you think that could be the case by November?
Ooh, that would be exciting. I mean, a fall announcement of an Apple TV would be amazing. I think we talked when the M3 came out, and Apple was so high on the graphics capabilities of the M3, with ray tracing and that sort of thing, that I said this has to come to an Apple TV. And it seems like the M4 is going to quickly replace the M3. So I would love to see an M4 Apple TV in the fall. That would be really amazing and open up the Apple TV to some of these titles as well. So I hope to see it for sure. I'm moving to Apple Original News. We do have some more information regarding last week's discussion about Charlene Yee sharing their experience on the set of Time Bandits. After the time of recording last week, Paramount TV Studios issued a statement to Variety saying the safety of our cast and crew is very important to us, and we take all concerns that are raised to us very seriously. At the time of the complaint, Paramount Television Studios conducted a full investigation regarding allegations that were brought to our attention. While all investigations are confidential and we cannot comment on specifics, additional steps were taken to address concerns. Now, last week in our discussion, Sigmund, we called for an investigation into the situation, and it seems that one was conducted at the time. However, Yee states on their Instagram story that they were not compensated for their onset injury caused by another actor. So we will continue to monitor this story and keep listeners posted if new information becomes available, but we did want to share that update.
On to some more positive news, and that is in relation to the Time Bandits, because we have a release date. The upcoming show, based off the much-beloved movie, will debut on Apple TV Plus on July 24th. It's a new live-action comedic adventure series for all ages, created for television by Jermaine Clement, Ian Morris and Taika Waititi, and stars Lisa Kudrow, Kel El Tuck, Taj Murphy, Roger Jean Senga-Nyunga, and Rune Tempt, amongst an endless ensemble cast, with special guest appearances by none other than Taika Waititi and Clement. The 10-episode series follows an eccentric crew of bandits who embark on an epic adventure while evil forces threaten their conquests and life as they know it, as they journey through the creation of Stonehenge, see the Trojan horse in action, escape dinosaurs in the prehistoric ages, wreak havoc during the medieval times, experience the Ice Age, ancient civilizations, the Harlem Renaissance, and much, much more along the way. I'm looking forward to this one. No info just yet on whether these are all coming in one foul swoop or if this is a weekly release, but very excited for this. And I love Lisa Kudrow, so to see her head a show like this, I think it's going to be very, very cool. Following on, just under a month later, on August 14th, is the global debut of Bad Monkey. This is the much anticipated series from creator Bill Lawrence, based on the book by Carl Hayson. This stars Vince Vaughn, L. Scott Caldwell, Rob Delaney, Meredith Hagner, Natalia Martinez, and a host of others, including guest stars John Ortiz, the return of Zach Braff to a Bill Lawrence comedy, and Charlotte Lawrence. The 10-episode comedy tells the story of Andrew Yancey, who has been bounced from the Miami Police Department and is now a health inspector in the Keys. But after stumbling upon a case that begins with a human arm fished up by tourists, he realises that if he can prove murder, he'll be back in. He just needs to get past a trove of Florida oddballs and one Bad Monkey. A first look at Bad Monkey will be linked in the show notes. We got quite a few first look photos this week for this show. Cannot wait for this. Also, member of the writing team, Brett Goldstein, who played Roy Kent in Ted Lasso. So, yeah, looking forward to this. I think it's going to be very, very cool. But we have a little bit of a wait, Devon.
In the meantime, we're going to be keeping up with all the in-production news as well for Apple Originals. This week, we found out that John Krasinski and Natalie Portman began production on their upcoming heist flick The Fountain of Youth in Liverpool last week. The film centers around a pair of siblings searching for the mythical fountain and is a joint production between Skydance and Apple Original Films. According to our close sources to the project, the film is penciled in to premiere in early 2025. In development, we have some very exciting news. I was so happy to see this press release today, Sigmund. French-Japanese drama Drops of God will return for a second season on Apple TV+, with stars Fleur Jeffrier and Tomohisa Yamashita returning, as well as director Odin Ruskin. In Season 2, Camille and Issei once again face a nearly impossible challenge to uncover the origin of the world's most wonderful wine, a secret that even Alexandre Leger failed to unlock. Through a series of trials and tests, their quest will take them to far-flung corners of the globe, forcing them to face their inner demons and changing them forever. Now, this was a surprise one for me, Sigmund. It came out of nowhere, and I loved it. And so I'm very excited that it's coming back for a second season on Apple TV+. I can't wait to jump back in with Camille and Issei and their search for the world's most wonderful wine.
Further in development is the adaptation of Charlotte McConaughey's novel Once There Were Wolves. Apple have ordered a series adaptation which will be led by Elizabeth Olsen and written by Alice Addison and Gareth Davis. The book follows Eniti Flynn, who arrives in Scotland with her twin sister Aggie to spearhead a team of biologists tasked with reintroducing 14 grey wolves into the secluded Highlands. Inti must navigate her sister's struggles and the mysterious death of a local farmer while fighting for the dying landscape she's been tasked with revitalising. The project is expected to enter production in the fourth quarter of this year in Scotland. Again, another really interesting project.
Very interesting indeed. I'll be interested to hear more about this as it gets closer to production and the cast continues to fill out. A cast I'm very excited about are the two lead roles in upcoming heist series 12-12-12, which is going to be led by Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan. This one's coming to Apple TV Plus with Carrie Skoglund attached to executive produce and direct the first episode. The series follows a disgraced FBI agent and an American career criminal who play a zero-sum game of cat and mouse across Europe. At the center of it all is the daring, epic raid of a bank vault deep beneath the streets of Zurich. It will take place across 3 separate timelines, the 12 months prior to the heist, the 12 hours of the heist, and the 12 days after. That explains the 12-12-12 in the title. Sounds like an interesting concept. I'm excited about the creative forces behind it as well. Finally, for in development, Puck reports that Apple has shown interest in a Judd Apatow project that includes Ben Stiller in the lead role, Mike Judge directing, and Brent Forrester writing. I have to say that sounds intriguing to me as well, Sigmund. However, the company allegedly wants to develop the script or to make a pilot before greenlighting the series, so it is yet to be seen if it will ever make it to our screens. This was interesting. We haven't heard, at least I haven't heard about Apple doing a lot of pilots. For the most part, they send things to series, but maybe this could be a change in strategy a little bit to test out some concepts before fully committing to them. I don't know. Regardless, based only on the people behind the scenes, I'm interested to see if this goes anywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting to me just because I'm a big Judd Apatow fan. Mike Judge, great second name, but also just a prolific creator who I've been a fan of for a long, long time. And of course, Brent Forrester, incredible writer. So please, let's make this a reality. If Apple don't, I'd imagine someone will. Fingers crossed, someone will. But hopefully Apple is the place to allow those creative juices to flow. And the creative juices are flowing with this week's Apple TV releases, beginning today with our highlight, the premiere of Trying Season 4 with its first 2 episodes, alongside new episodes of Acapulco, The Big Door Prize, and Dark Matter, and the penultimate episode of Loot. I can't believe that series has flown by as quickly as it has. On Friday, we see a new immersive video coming to Apple Vision Pro, and that is Parkour, the latest episode from the Adventure series. This is episode 2, where we join the world's leading parkour athletes on a gravity-defying trek across the streets and rooftops of Paris with a runtime of 12 minutes. I say runtime because it's parkour as well. Just so happens to be in Paris, which probably is going to lead into a nice international rollout of Apple Vision Pro soon. At least that's the hope. On the TV app on Friday for everywhere else, we have a new episode of The Big Cigar and Friday Night Baseball with Milwaukee Brewers at Boston Red Sox at 7 p.m. Eastern, followed by Baltimore Orioles at Chicago White Sox, starting just 30 minutes later at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And then on Saturday and Sunday, of course, more MLS action on MLS Season Pass. Devon, your Minnesota update, please.
Well, they're going strong. Had a tie last week that I posted about this on Mastodon. I got the notification and added the live activity to my phone, and immediately the other team scored. So I was a little depressed about that. But, that's how it goes. They brought it back for a tie, so that's great. And I did want to say that for those interested, Minnesota is actually in this weekend's free matchup, Saturday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, if you want to watch along.
Very cool. I'm happy to see at least a modicum of success for the young manager, the youngest MLS manager ever, coming from Manchester United to Minnesota. So I'm happy to follow along each week. Now, last week saw the finale to an incredible show. I think one that really surprised us on multiple fronts, and that is Sugar. A series about an enigmatic private detective struggling with personal demons as he investigates the disappearance of Hollywood producer's beloved granddaughter.
All the leaves are brown.
John Sugar, private investigator.
And the sky is gray.
My granddaughter vanished. I need you to find her.
Sugar, I don't like this case for you.
There's more to you than meets the eye.
Is there?
You have secrets. I need you to stop looking.
Who's they?
Sugar stars Colin Farrell, Amy Ryan, Kirby, James Cromwell, Anna Gunn, Nate Cordroy, Sydney Chandler, and Alex Hernandez. Created by Mark Protosevich and produced by Audrey Chan and Simon Kinberg, a regular on Apple TV+. It's also directed by Fernando Mireles, who did a really interesting interview with IndieWire last week about the creation of the show, including the use of iPhones whilst filming. Before we start with our recap, again, just a quick note, spoiler warning, because there's going to be some heavy spoilers, especially when it comes to a couple of episodes before the finale. Both a really fun watch, but bizarre, and I say that in a good way, because there are definitely some artistic risks throughout the series that really gel well with some really creative performances. And I think that's where we're going to start, Devon, with the style. Because I think when we initially broke down the trailer, that was the first thing that really had an impact on you.
Most definitely. And I will say, as much as the last time we talked about it, we were fans of the style and what they were doing there. They took some really heavy swings throughout the series as it was going as well, and just continue to, I think, iterate and push that style as far as it could possibly go, and something that I very much enjoyed. Of course, this is a new take on the noir style. That's something I really appreciated. There were some classic elements thrown in there, like that black and white opening scene to the whole series. When I saw that, I thought, okay, what are we getting ourselves into here? And you got the voiceover. It's very classic, right? And I think that was a little bit of an homage, but also just a starting point for the style and the opportunity to develop it and put their own spin on it as they went. Of course, there's those clips of classic films thrown in as well, just giving the series a sense, I think, of history and just a place within its own genre, which I really enjoyed. But then, of course, they threw in some new and modern elements as well, like the editing of conversations, where the conversation would be going constantly but the visuals would be cutting between different shots, and you were never quite sure at what point in a conversation you were because there were overlapping sentences, and it's just really interesting the way that they edited this to kind of constantly keep you on your toes, and I think just make you feel a little bit like you're on the outside. Even as you're watching these conversations, you're not quite sure of what exactly is going on. On those classic film clips, as cool as it was to see them and see them used, I think the way they were used was actually very innovative and modern. It was almost like a stream of consciousness type thing with Sugar, and just the way he relates to the world. As he was just going about the world, he would see things that would remind him of a film, and then that film clip would just pop up. That was just his way of relating. And as he gets more emotionally charged in certain situations, the clips get a little bit more erratic as they come. And I thought the way they used those clips was very well done. Now, I know you're a fan of classic films, Sigmund, so you probably identified more of those than I did as the series was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I saw many references in Sugar. They included The Big Heat, Kiss Me Deadly, which I think I mentioned when we were looking at the trailer. Then you had Johnny Guitar, Gilda, I think The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, Sunset Boulevard for sure, Dead Reckoning, Knock on Any Door, Sherlock Jr., In a Lonely Place, The Killers, definitely, Double Indemnity, which is one of my favourites. I think I actually mentioned Double Indemnity when we were talking about The After Party and its second season. The Thing, The Third Man, just a classic that if you're into film and you've not witnessed that film, you need to. Just incredible. The Night Hunter, Touch of Evil, The Sweet Smell of Success, Vertigo, The Lady from Shanghai, and of course, probably the most recent out of this list, LA Confidential. I can confidently say that I own like 40% of that list of films in the TV app. And so I did pick up on some of the references, but that is a full list of references throughout the series,
Wow.
Devon.
Yeah, really, really deep cuts there, and great deep dive on film history through clips in Sugar. And I just appreciated the way they used those to communicate his emotional state. I thought that was really smart and just a great way of getting us into his head and how he relates to the world. Now, I will say that the more bizarre style elements didn't prevent me from following the plot. Thankfully, sometimes I think those can become a shtick and can kind of distract you away from what's going on. But this, I think, actually enhanced the experience of watching the show and following the plot. These elements did keep me intrigued until we finally got an explanation as to what was really going on. We're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. But before, we're going to keep everybody on the edge just a little bit longer, Sigmund, and we're going to talk about the character of Sugar, because I think he really is an interesting centerpiece for a TV series and played just so well by Colin Farrell, who gives us so much but also so little at the same time, I feel like. And there's just so many layers to this character that I loved getting to know him throughout the series. I would say he's earnest. That's something that we pick up from him. He honestly wants to help people. And as smart as he is, and as intelligent as he is, and as perceptive as he is, I would still say Sugar still gives off almost a naive vibe in the way that he believes that he can make things better for others. Of course, we see him pursuing this case of this missing woman, and every step of the way, people are telling him, man, you just got to give up. You got to let go. You got to just let this be. And he just won't let it go. He believes that if he carries on, he can solve this case and find her and get her safely home. And despite insurmountable opposition from every side, right, he carries on. And there's something too that I think that's admirable, just that someone who could have become so beaten down by the world and become cynical still believes that there's good that's worth fighting for, and that he can be the agent of that good. I think that's something that's worth admiring and emulating, something I really enjoyed about his character.
I started to watch, and I was wondering if he was starting to spiral, and be in denial because he believes that the missing woman is still alive, and yet as a viewer, you're kind of given insurmountable evidence to suggest that she is not. And that's going to tie in really well with the second season, because I think if there's one thing that we can take from these 8 episodes, and they did go by very quickly, is that we need people to really make their way to Apple's LA offices and start banging on the doors and making sure that the second season is greenlit. It's not just because of that element to the story, right, in which we now know with the finale that it does look like the missing person is alive and that there is a finality to the story that we can explore. But also, 2 episodes from the finale, we were introduced to a completely different element that was really under disguise for the first few hours of this journey.
Yeah, we've hinted at the big reveal, and it's time I think we talk about it. And that's the revelation that this private detective, this noir fellow that we've been following for 3 or 4 episodes now, is actually from another planet. And he's been disguising himself as a human to observe people, to gather data for some mysterious purposes that we don't totally understand, but that all of his investigation and the work that he's been doing has actually been a cover for his extraterrestrial plans that he's been sent to carry out. Very, very interesting twist, Sigmund. One that I personally did not see coming at all. I could tell that...
It's okay, I don't think anyone did.
You could tell the whole time that something was up with Sugar, and he's a part of this group of people who meet at this woman, Ruby's house. And at first I thought maybe it was a group of private investigators, but it turns out they all have different jobs, but they're all observing, and you don't totally understand why, but you get the idea that Ruby is handling them and keeping them on task, whatever they're doing. So you start to think that maybe, at least I did, that he's a spy of some kind, or, that he's working for some secret organization. But then we get to a point in the series where he gets into a shootout, and he's able to block a bullet with his hand. And that's the moment when I'm like, what in the world just happened? Is this some Captain America super serum stuff that we're dealing with? Or what? And even then, I didn't make the connection that he could be an alien. I thought maybe he was some kind of experiment or something. But at the end of the episode, he looks in the mirror and he lets his guard down for a moment, and we see his true nature, his blue skin, and the reason he's been needing to take these drugs to keep his cover all along. So, yeah, completely out of the blue and completely just subverting, I think, every expectation, at least that I had, for where the series was going.
I think this was the moment where I finally twigged why Simon Kinberg was involved with this series, because obviously he's always been connected with sci-fi, right, in that genre. I cannot wait to hopefully see a second season of Sugar. Honestly, if there isn't, something is up. So yes, I demand it, Apple, a second season of Sugar coming to Apple TV Plus in the future. But until then, you can check out the first season in full and watch it again and again and again across all of your screens on Apple TV Plus. Now, as we do with each week, we end our episode with some up next picks and highlights from the TV app. And we're going to switch traditions this time round. And I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Of course, with WWDC coming, we also had a Microsoft event this week, Google I.O. last week, and Google I.O. kicked off in the strangest way with a musician running around in a bright coloured robe shouting Google. I don't know if you checked this out yourself, it was bizarre, but it felt pretty normal to me, given that I'd seen this years earlier in a very sharp and comically accurate takeoff of Silicon Valley called Silicon Valley. It's created by Mike Judge, John Altschler, and Dave Kaczynski. It premiered on HBO in 2014, concluded 5 years later, running for 6 seasons, and it focuses on Richard Hendricks, a programmer who founds a startup company called Pied Piper, and chronicles his struggles to maintain his company whilst facing competition from larger entities at play. It is a worthy rewatch. If you have seen it already, I no doubt you're going to get so many references and have a good chuckle again. This is something that I revisit every year during and in the lead up to WWDC. Otherwise, my up next pick this week on Saturday sees the repeat of last year's FA Cup final. Once again, a Manchester derby between Manchester United and Manchester City. Now, the two clubs are in close proximity, but with very different recent histories. Manchester City are a state-owned club. They have 115 charges to their name, resulting in allegations of financial doping and other improprieties, basically sports cheating. And then we have Manchester United, once dominant football club, slowly pulling itself up by its bootstraps after being stitched up by bad US ownership, now with new owners tied to the Manchester area. So hopefully we'll see some success. Manchester United have had next to no luck this year, with injuries plaguing the whole season. They finished 8th, which is the worst in many, many years. I'm hoping that all of the luck comes in one 90-minute match and that they can finally get one over Manchester City. Now, this is the second time in history that both teams are facing off in the final. Last year, as the game kicked off, I was boarding a flight to WWDC, waiting patiently for online access that didn't come after I was told that unfortunately no internet access on this flight due to storms. And then the pilot went and ruined the fact that we'd lost a few hours later. So this year United hadn't had any luck at all. I'm hoping it's all been saved for the final. This is one of the biggest globally viewed football games in the season. So check out the sports tab in the TV app to see where it is streaming near you.
Very cool, and best of luck to your team this weekend, Sigmund. Before my pick, we have a few highlights coming to the TV app. Dune Part 2 is now streaming on Max, so if that's one you've been waiting to see, it's now available. Civil War is on video on demand this Friday. Also coming to the TV app this week is The Fall Guy, an extended version with an extra 20 minutes added onto the theatrical version, and Stress Positions starring John Early. I'm not familiar with this one, Sigmund. You want to give us a little plug for it?
Yeah, it's a strange comedy set during COVID times. Normally this wouldn't be something that I would be at all interested in, but John Early is such a talent and someone that makes me laugh a lot. So yeah, it made the TV app highlights this week. I will just very quickly say, if you want a surround sounds Atmos workout, then check out Civil War. Very visceral soundscape there. And The Fall Guy, I think it released in cinemas like 3 weeks ago by Universal. I don't know what they're doing in terms of their theatrical runs. This was way too quick. I did see it in theatres, and I'm interested in this extended version with an extra 20 minutes. The ode to stunt workers is something that I think should be celebrated as much as the stunt workers are themselves. So yeah, definitely check that out. Now, in terms of up next picks for this week, how are we ending this episode? Something creepy, something scary, or something fun? Maybe a bit of everything.
I'd say this one's got a mix of both, Sigmund. My pick for this week is the return of Monsters at Work, an animated series on Disney+. Of course, set in the world of Monsters, Inc., one of my favorite films growing up. I love that movie so much, and so I was really happy when Disney Plus first launched that this is one of their launch titles to kind of get back to that world. This one follows a young monster named Tyler Tuskman who goes to school to be a scarer and then graduates just as the industry is changing to relying on laughs rather than scaring. And so he doesn't have the skill set to be a comedian, so he is assigned to maintenance duty at Monsters, Inc. And so we get a whole different side of that world, and as well as his journey of trying to find his place within it. So this is the second season. I really enjoyed the first. Of course, it's an animated series. It's meant for people of all ages, but if you're a fan of Monsters, Inc., and you haven't checked it out, check out Monsters at Work and spend some more time in that world. It does feature Mike and Sully quite a bit as well, so if you're interested in seeing more from them, definitely check this one out on Disney+.
Love it.
Well, that'll be all from us for this week, Sigmund. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Of course, we'd love to hear from you, so follow us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review there. You can also contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, or send an email to the show or an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We'll be back next week to recap Franklin and share this year's wishes for tvOS and Apple TV at WWDC. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.